Howdy folks, welcome to the Daily Coin. My name is Rory and today is Sunday, October the 7th, 2018, and I have the very distinct honor and great pleasure of welcoming to the show for the first time the president and CEO of a great mining company called Aton Resources. You can find them listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol AAN, and in the United States you can find them on the OTC market under the symbol ALNBF. And I'm speaking of Mr. Mark Campbell. And Mr. Campbell has been involved in a variety of gold mining operations as well as drilling operations throughout Egypt, and he's been involved with the investment banking world as well. His resume is right there on the screen. Mark, welcome to the Daily Coin.
Well, howdy, Roy. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, and you have a very interesting story that I've just been introduced to, and I'm very grateful for it because it's really a very cool story about mining in Egypt. But I want to ask you about the mining industry. I want to start off there with, and as you know, it's been suffering for many years as far as what's been happening. And how do you see the gold market as of 2018, and what impact do you see the mining industry having on the gold market over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, yeah. Well, let me take those one at a time.
Okay.
The first one is, being an exploration company, we don't produce any gold yet. And so from our perspective, where the gold price goes, up, down, sideways, doesn't really impact us, except in a sort of more general view that we're a gold exploration company. But the price of gold and where it goes is less important to us than it is obviously to people who are producers, and are, the price of their product, as it were, fluctuates, and obviously they have fixed costs, and so the importance to them is that margin, and mining is a margin business. And so, the gold price for us is what it is and where it goes. We don't look at it in the same way as, say, Barek or a producer would look at it.
Okay.
In terms of the mining industry, yes, the mining industry has been hit, hard, and what that can affect, just like oil, if exploration goes down because the exploration budgets and the and people aren't out drilling for oil, then obviously production slows. You need to bring on new production, and the biggest people that be hit are the junior exploration companies like ourselves, and that is really a function of a couple of things. One was and it has been the price of gold. The second one has also been the fact that we depend upon risk dollars, and we're really the venture capital arm of the mining industry.
Right.
And when you get other when money flows to things like cryptocurrencies and pot and all the rest of it, obviously that takes a leg out from that stool of investors that we sort of depend on. That seems to be coming back a bit. We are seeing more interest in projects. I think people, there's been a lot of rationalization in the industry. I think we'll see more M&A like the Barek Randgold merger. I think that was necessary, and I think it was a good thing, this rationalization. I think that, going forward, I think that it's a pretty bright future over the next 5 years for the mining industry. And I think there is a lot of opportunity in finding opportunity and finding economic deposits is obviously the job of the junior exploration company. So that's one of the reasons we're very excited about where we are, which is Egypt, because it really is the frontier.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to talk to you about what's happening in Egypt because that's a country that everybody's familiar with, but we don't ever hear about it in regards to mining. And we're going to get into that in just a minute. But I wanted to ask you about the Barek Randgold merger, and you mentioned that, and that was a huge piece of news that just came out just recently, and
That's right.
China was a third-party investor, kind of a backdoor investor in this because they bought a bunch of stock from, I believe it was from Barek, in
Yep.
order to fund this whole thing. And China, as you're well aware, Mark, has been buying entire mines over the past few years in order to continue to be able to acquire gold and to add gold to their vaults without telling anybody what they're doing. And
Right.
do you see? And this is pure speculation, but I think that
Sure.
it's founded in reality in history of what the recent history, what I was just mentioning. Do you see China taking over the Barrick Randgold merger? And the second part of the question is, do you see more of these large scale companies, these upper end mergers happening?
Yeah, I mean, in the first one, I mean, obviously you're right. It's pure speculation. Would they take over all of that? It's hard to say. There is, certainly what we do see, even here in Egypt and other places, are the Chinese looking around.
Oh yeah.
And these are not private companies. They're not like us or somebody else. Most of them are controlled by the state. So they have pretty deep pockets.
Yes.
And so but it's interesting that that there is more interest out of the Chinese. I mean, they'd always been big in the bullion market, but not so much in actually going out and buying mines. And that was an interesting sideline to that, that the Chinese got involved. So the answer is, sure, that's a possibility. In terms of your other question, I think that that we are going to see more mergers. I think whether we see the Chinese getting involved in them as well, possibly. I mean, and they have quietly acquired mines around the area. And so, it's not without, it's within the realms of possibility that they will become more active in that. But I certainly think we're going to see some consolidation in the mining industry over the next several years.
I think so too. I think that it's going to have to because of what's happened over the past almost decade now of like you were saying, the exploration dollars just haven't been there, but they still have to produce gold. So they're going to have to do something. And one way that they can do that they can continue to show profits and to pay dividends and so forth is to merge. And you're in Egypt, which I find is just incredible. That I mean, I've been part of this industry for several years now, and this is the first time that I've heard of anyone doing any exploration or mining in Egypt. And I was listening to your interview with Kerry Lutz over at Financial Survival Network the other day, and you mentioned in that interview that Egypt has been mined for more than 10,000 years. I mean, are we not hearing about it because all the minerals have been mined out? Or why do we not hear about Egypt's mining? I know that I'm just joking.
Yeah. No, it's an excellent question because it really It's something that people don't realize. I mean, when you think of Egypt, and you actually do see in mining, you just don't realize it. If you look at King Tut's household effects, his gold funeral mask, and all the rest of it, this all came from the mines in the eastern desert of Egypt. Back there in the pharaonic period. And gold was exceedingly important to the ancient Egyptians. It gave them their basis of power. It was a sign of wealth. So you have a lot of objects that were gold, but there was also copper mining here. There was zinc mining here. At one point, it was the largest supplier of emeralds to Europe. They produced rubies and, of course, peridot. And so, it goes back. And even on our 738 square kilometer exploration concession, we have numerous examples of, ancient mining going back to the Old Kingdom, right up to the Brits. We have 3 old British mines there. 2 are gold. 1 was high-grade tungsten. Oh, wow. And that basically fizzled out right around the beginning, just before the First World War. It sort of came back a little bit, and then really after the Second World War just sort of died a death. Oil and gas came to be the major focus for Egypt, and mining really withered and died on the vine. And it wasn't until Centamin, which is run by a guy called Samuel Raggi from Australia, came and started exploring back in 1994 here in at a place called Sukari. And interesting enough, the way I ended up getting involved in mining at all here was in 1995. I got involved with Centamin, even though I had an oil field service company. But I mean, that was my introduction. So I was there right from nearly the beginning of that. And they finally built a mine in 2009 and put it into production. And it is, by any stretch of the imagination, they produce, a world-class mine. They produce about 500,000 ounces a year. They have about 15 to 17 million in reserves. So it's a big deal. Yeah. But nobody else was coming. And the reason is very simple. What Egypt decided was, well, oil and gas, mining, they're both extractive industries. And we use the model production sharing agreement in oil and gas, and that works fine for the oil and gas industry. So it will be fine for the mining industry. The problem is that extractive is the beginning and the end of where mining and oil and gas are anything alike. And the economics are completely back to front. In oil and gas, you spend a lot of money up front doing all the exploration and drilling wells and completing them. And then once you've decided that it's a producer, you stick a production wellhead on it, and one guy comes out and reads the gauges a month. Mining, on the other hand, the exploration costs are very low. But when you decide you have an economic deposit and you go to build a mine, the capital costs and the operating costs become huge. So, the production sharing agreement, which also includes the government having a 50-50 share with you, simply does not work in the mining industry. And so it's been, somewhat negative, has had a negative impact on it. And that's why there's only ourselves. We're the only listed company here in exploring in Egypt, and another company called Tani Stratex, which is a private venture, who is also here. And that's it. That's the mining industry at the moment. Wow. We think that this is changing. The Minister of Petroleum and Tariq Al-Mullah and the President Sisi, are determined to maximize the mineral wealth of Egypt. And therefore, they've hired Wood Mackenzie, the large resource consulting group, to undertake basically the same thing they did for Ecuador, and to put in place a modern mining code, which is based on tax, rent, and royalty, no joint venture with the government, and to make it an attractive investment destination for exploration companies. And the great thing about Egypt in that is it's got two really great things going for it. First of all, it's a really a explorationist Disney World. There's not been a lot of work done. It's very much virgin territory. We certainly have gold here. We certainly have copper and zinc, but there's nickel mapped here, and and molybdenum and all sorts of minerals that nobody has come to look for. And so, and it's from just a geological perspective, it's very, very interesting. That's not just in the Eastern Desert. That also includes the Sinai Peninsula as well. And the other thing is that we have is the government here over the years has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on building infrastructure. So just outside of our main gate, we have a 4-lane highway. We're 2.5 hours away from 2 international airports. We have power lines running through our area, a railway that runs through us. So, the infrastructure is there. Did I lose you?
And the infrastructure is hugely important to what you're doing. Those roads, the power, the rail system, the fact that you're close to a seaport, all of these things are just a huge benefit to what you're doing. And I don't mean to interrupt you, Mark, but you had mentioned something in the interview with Carrie, and it really got my attention. And you said 3 words that were like, you said, mountain of gold. And
yes.
And when I heard you say mountain of gold, it was like, okay, I have to stop everything and pay attention to what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I tell you, that's the other thing that is very, interesting is that, and I guess, people, it's one of those Indiana Jones sort of moments. And this goes to the heart of what I was talking about, ancient gold mining.
Yes.
And of course, in those days, they had to high grade because they didn't have the technology that we have today, nor did they have the mechanical bulk mining that we have today. But essentially what it was is that, as I mentioned, on our property, we have a lot of examples of old mines. And in an area called East Eridiah, which is a wadi or a valley, if you want to, but we found an old processing area, washing tables, grinding stones, and this probably comes from the early Arab period. And so we found that, and there were some tailings dumps there that had 20 gram plus material in them.
Wow!
So we knew that they were mining something pretty high grade if they were leaving that behind.
Yes.
And so we started trenching and looking around close to where that was and found absolutely nothing. So we're trying to figure out where this gold was coming from. And the Bedouin talked about mountain of gold, but nobody had ever found it. It was just sort of legend. And there was no name to it. It was a nameless mountain somewhere. So using spectral imaging and, just good old boots on the ground, our geologists found some old paths. Now remember that we're talking about barren rock. This is not sand dunes. This is not that type. This is just very rough, rocky terrain.
Okay.
And so nothing, and because it's dry, these paths don't disappear. So they set off, and it's about 3 kilometers away, this mountain. And it's a long mountain, and as it goes, it's to the east, it sort of forks into 2 ridges. And so they go up and they climb up, and it's very rugged, very steep. At some points, 70 degrees. And they finally get up to the top of this thing, and that was the wow moment. Because all over both ridges were the remnants of old mines, some that go down 40 to 50 meters. Now, remember, they're using stone tools. And the whole thing is honeycombed with them. And so that means that, many people had been working there probably for many years on these things. And so we're pretty sure that we're the first people to go up there in probably 1600 years. We found ancient clay lamps with the wicks in them. We found ancient ropes that they used to climb down into these things. And, you could just imagine being in a tight, confined space, chiseling away with a rock hammer. And so, it must have been fairly rich in a lot of this material, and gold in particular. So that was, for us, that was really, out of all of our portfolio, and we've got about 17 legitimate exploration targets in our area.
Wow.
That really became the focal point. That was last December. We then had to build a 4.5-kilometer road up the side of the mountain. And I'll tell you what, that's not for people to have vertigo. The excavator driver, I'm pretty sure, is half mountain goat. And, the name, and so the geologists named it Rod Ruin, but the Rod Ruin morphed out of what we originally called it, which was ROD, which was an acronym for Ridge of Death.
Oh, my.
Because it was so steep, so difficult terrain. So we've started drilling. We put out our first results last week that looked pretty good. We think that this is an extensive mineralized system throughout both the north and south ridges. It's a bit tricky because you do have some. We didn't think that when we first went down there, we thought we had vertical shafts. Well, no, you've got horizontal. And as I say, it's honeycomb. So you run into these voids, which is where they were working, in tunnels, as it were. And so, it's sort of tricky drilling and working out where you are. But, it's still the material we're getting back that, is seems to be pretty good. And it's, you get some good grades, and then you get these areas of very high grades within them. So it's interesting. It's interesting geology because even though it's broadly speaking, it's a sort of VMS type environment. It is different than some of our other areas. We have various types of geology in our license area. We have, orogenic, structurally controlled. We have, intrusive related. So it's quite interesting, and this is more really in the sediments. We see mineralized shales, for example. Not something you see very often anywhere. So it's one of the things that we do, as opposed to just look. Our goal is to find economic deposits to turn it into money for our shareholders.
Right.
But at the same time, we also have, because it's virgin territory. We also are figuring out the geology as we go along, because there really is no there's no precedent. So you don't have geological data that you could point to and say, oh yes, this is what that is. So it's quite exciting. The potential, as I say, for Egypt geologically is huge. And I think that we're in a good place because we're the first mover. I mean, we're it. With the changes coming in the mining code that will open it up for people to really come and explore and do that. I think that it's a great place to be and a great opportunity we have.
Yeah, it sounds like a really incredible project that you have, the Rod Ruin. I mean, that's a perfect name for it. When you said that it was a 70% grade, it was just like, my goodness, that's close to straight up. I mean, but
that's right.
In the fact that it's only been mined by hand, some 1,600 years ago, and you were finding 20 grams in tailings. That has a lot of promise right there. It sounds like it anyway.
Well, I mean, if you just think about it in terms of the fact in those days they had no ability to build roads or what have you. So
Right.
these people were mining this and then carrying it down the slopes and then taking it 3 kilometers. So
Wow.
to put all that work into it, it must have really been something, or they who'd do that.
Exactly. I mean,
It's
because
not like it didn't have anything to do at the weekend, sort of thing. I mean, it was a pretty massive scale.
it sounds like you guys are in a great position with an unbelievable project. I mean, and it sounds really cool the fact that you found all of these ancient ruins to go along with this whole story. I mean, it's a great story, and
Yeah.
it's
Well, I mean, that's the advantage of Egypt. I mean, Egypt, you go throughout the Eastern Desert, and you will find all of these. It's not just where we are, but it's across Egypt. And so, from an explorationist part, we're not doing Nobel Prize winning geology here. I mean,
right,
we're going where the old timers were and starting there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, you're successful. It's not like it, but it is a starting point, and Egypt
right.
has a lot of that because it has such a long history.
Well, 10,000 years. That's quite a
Yeah.
that's quite a long history. Um,
Yep.
and, and we've been speaking with Mark Campbell. He's the president and CEO of Aton Resources. You can find them listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol AAN, and in the United States, you can find them on the OTC market under the symbol ALNBF. Mark, this is a great story, and I really wish you nothing but success, and I hope that we can follow up with you in a couple of months and find out more about this mountain of gold, because that's just sounds really incredible, and I really want to hear more about what you guys are doing. So I hope we can follow up in a couple of months and see what's going on.
Well, no, Rory, I'm happy to at any time. I love talking about it, so
Yeah,
that's
I can
that's
hear the
fine.
enthusiasm.
So, yeah. All right.
and
Well,
I
thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I know it's late because you are in Egypt, and it's in a late evening and early morning here for me. And I'll let you
Yep.
get back to your evening. And I certainly appreciate all your time today.
Well, thank you very much. Y'all have a good night now.